Hey, Ken, how are you, honey? Yeah. Michela, this is the son. He lives in the neighborhood. He's a very, raised in Italy. He's a very good friend.
And you live in the neighborhood? Yeah. I hope you buy your book tomorrow.
Great. I'll get you in. Let's see.
Of course. It's all about marketing. So this.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you okay? Nice room, people.
Good evening. Oh, wait. Hello, good evening. Okay. Does this work? Now it works. Now it works, right? Can you hear me? Okay. I mean, I have a deep voice, so I really don't need the microphone. Thank you so much. Grazie mille per essere venuti qua questa sera. Thank you so much for coming tonight. So I am books for this really special event. I mean, this is it's an event that it's really dear to me, not only because of the book and the people that are involved with the book, but really the meaning of the book and what it. I think that the entire idea and the project behind, and there were geraniums everywhere, Geraniums is just a fantastic work that has been such a long time needed, needed for such a long time. And when I opened the bookstore 10 years ago, the idea was to create an Italian-American cultural hub. That was our tagline. And we wanted to promote, and this is what we do still today, Italian-American authors, Italian-American culture, Italian-American writing, because there really wasn't a space, I think, for the public where the material that was out there could be accessible. But as this material keeps coming out, one thing was missing, I think, and what was missing was this book. And so this is an enormous gap that, the many people who have contributed to it have filled. And so I'm very grateful to Joanna and to everyone else who contributed and who you will hear from tonight. Thank you again, Joanna, Jackie Puto, Mariana Leone, Loretta, Garitano, everybody for coming tonight, and all of you for coming tonight. So with that, I will leave it to Joanna Klaus Herman, who, if you haven't read her books, you should definitely read them. They are eye-opening again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I use the mic or not? Well, what a good room. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for coming. Now, I want to say this about Nicola, and this is very similar to Stefano at the Casa Italiana at NYU. These people do the heavy lifting. When the book was being translated from Italian into English, and Gianluca didn't quite know what to do about distribution, Nicola said, no problem. Get in line with me. I'm going to show you everything. It's simple, but that is key. If he wasn't there saying that, the whole thing would have been much more Mishkambrulia. But it was not Mishkambrulia. It was tutto posto. So I really thank you profoundly. And the staff, Aileen, yes, Anna, and Bella. Michela, grazie. Thank you for your work. We really appreciate that. So And the thing is, it's true, like without these places, we don't have that sense of community. It makes community in a way that nothing else does really. So one of the things I love to talk about, one of the things that I am deeply involved with, I have a little nice, Chris, you'll recognize this, serial obsession. Remember when he says that in the adaptation? I have many. And he said, and then I got rid of those antiques. I didn't care about those antiques. That's when he was on to the orphans, right? I hear that. Okay, so one of my serial obsessions is the Greeks world, the ancient Greeks world connection to all of southern Italy. And many immigrants in the United States are from that part of Italy, and they were up there. They settled along the coast, they went up the rivers, they established communities, they brought their crafts, and lo and behold, the culture is still with us. It really is still with us. And I've taught Homer for many, many years. It was one of my great pleasures. And I used to do this. I used to say, these people are just like my people. Isn't that hilarious? Oh, just like these people are just like my people. Hey, wait a minute. So then I started to really write about that and make a connection. I'm going to talk about two things that come from the Greeks. And one of them is xenia, and it's the guest-host relationship. And those rules are very, very important, that you follow the rules as the guest and as the host. And Nicola is certainly an exemplary, and so is I Am Books, exemplary hosts. And we must be exemplary guests. So I keep that word, it's a good word. But there are a couple of other words I want to talk about that come from that, but one of them especially. So we know that the human species has been migrating and walking since we started up out of Africa, right? We just have never stopped moving. We know that's true, right? Came up and spread, right? But right now, something new is going on. And it relates to part of what we're writing about, which is last year, there were more people living outside of their birth communities than in any other time in modern history. Mm-hmm. And it has caused a terrible, terrible crisis and tragedy, as we know. And it's devastating. And I just would like the reading tonight to keep that in mind, because our people experienced that leaving home. So let's just keep those people in mind. And I feel like the West went and stirred the world with a spoon, and now we don't want to take care of these people. So I just wanted to just mention them in passing. But okay, so I want to talk about two words specifically. The first word that I'd love to talk about is the Greek word nostos. And nostos underlies, it's like the key word that pulls the whole Odyssey up, right? Odysseus wants to return home. And that's the denotative meaning of nostos, go home. But the connotative meaning is so much more powerful. It's the longing, it's the sadness, it's everything that is lost and has been taken from you. And wanting desperately to go back with you, where things were familiar, where you were known, where everything was known and you belonged. And to give that up, everybody who has written in this thing knows what our grandparents or our parents or people themselves, what the rip is when you give that up. Even if you want to leave, it's still a rip, a terrible, terrible rip. So nostos is one of the things that I really keep that word in mind. The other thing is, and we're not talking about nostalgia, even though etymologically it's the same. Nostos, gravitas, doesn't have anything to do with sentimentality. But the other word that, of course, is diaspora. Now, that's what we are directly writing about, is the diaspora. And that is the dispersion, the disruption, the being scattered hither and thither. Loretta is a perfect person. She was in Brooklyn, she was in Italy, she was in Italy, she was in back and forth and back and forth. She knows what that chair was like intimately. And even though Mia sorella Lucia, and many of us here, we still feel the sadness. We not only feel our grandmother's sadness, it comes down into us, in our bones, this longing and this loss. Even though we can go visit, that's irrelevant. It's not the same. And we envy our cousins who stayed and thrived. Okay, I'm going to make one more remark. There's a lovely scholar, his name is John Womack. He has studied the Mexican Revolution endlessly and for decades, right, John? He's been doing this for decades, and he wrote about Zapata and the Mexican Revolution. And I came across this paragraph in one of his prefaces, and I thought, this nails it. So I'm going to read it to you. And a little louder, a little louder.
Paragraph.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the mic for this. Now, 'cause this is really important. Is that good? Is that a little louder? No? No, just.
You're
I'll
good, Joe, you're good.
just talk about it. Okay. So Jack Womack. Yeah,
I'll fix it.
you know what, let it go. It's okay. It's okay.
I'll fix it for this.
All right. But I'll wait for a minute. Okay, that's good. Let's try that. Now let's see what happens. Hello, hello.
Maybe you took it down.
Just down to it. Yeah. Better?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. These were people who did not want to leave home, leave their villages, their parishes, all the family saints, property, claims, business, work, security, heritage, insurance, memories, faith, hope, all that they had there. They had to quit their communities, their communion. However poor they were, they had to go into relations sometimes incomparably worse. A vast, random, ruthless exchange, the labor market. Just like our immigrants, to live indefinitely as strangers, off wages, among strangers, fend for themselves wherever they would have to go, especially since they did not yet know there would be new communities. They themselves would make good new communities. They could learn their own companionship and comradeship. And that it says it, right? That is what it's all about. So with that, each of these women tonight will read about an aspect of this.
Thanks, Joe.
First read a message from the editors of the anthology. Dear friends and authors, thank you for dear friends and authors, thank you for hosting. We are truly honored to be here, even if from afar. This anthology was published in Italy a year ago, and everywhere we have gone, it has been met with open arms, heartfelt responses, and a shared sense that this book carries something meaningful, something that resonates. We cannot hide our sadness of not being there today. Being part of this Boston's North End event would have been deeply moving. We grew up listening to stories of immigration. They planted the first seeds of this book. Because books are not born the day they are printed, they are conceived long before and wait for the right moment to take shape. E c'erano Geraniums dappertutto, lived within us for a long time before becoming words on paper. Thanks to the others who said yes to our invitation, and thank you, I Am Books, for welcoming our Geraniums today. We hope they will take root in your hearts and continue to bloom across time, borders, and generation. Deeply grateful, Valentina di Cesare and Michela Valmori. Now I'm going to read a passage from my contribution to the anthology. The English version title is When Desperate or in Doubt, retold. And the Italian version title is Nel dubbio o nella disperazione nigra. I'm gonna summarize a little bit. I'm gonna read it in Italian. I'm the only one who's gonna read it in Italian, so don't worry. And the piece is about the fact that when I grew up, I grew up between literally in both places in Italy and the US, a little kind of back and forth. My parents was kind of undecided where the family should go, so they didn't take the decision. And so the stories were always about men's stories, and the men's stories were the stories that you can tell at the table, at the main table when the holidays were happening. And I was always wondering what the women were doing in their life, why nobody was talking about them. And when I will ask, people will say, oh, because they were feminine, because they were, I don't know, feminine. And but for me, it was like, now really couldn't be completely true, because not at the main table, but when I was helping when the women were cooking or cleaning the kitchen, there were little traces of story. So I kind of grew up trying to find out a little bit more here and there about those female stories that were hidden. And the stories were not about adventures and amazing thing, were mostly about survival. And so that's a little the piece what it's about. So I'm gonna read a short paragraph that the title is Ma dove erano le femmine? Where were the women? La storia dei miei familiari avventurosi e avventurieri erano storie al maschile. Erano bisnonni, nonni, padri, zii, fratelli o cugini. Ma dove erano le femmine? Le donne della famiglia, le poche zie, nonne e cugine che trapelavano, erano state sempre ferme, tanto ferme e comunque niente di interessante pareva essere capitato loro. Perché mai? Non mi riuscivo ad accontentare del perché erano femmine, perché a ben ascoltare delle tracce di storie c'erano, riferite più piano, non in pompa magna, non al tavolo pieno di gente delle festività, ma piuttosto di sfuggita mentre si attizzava il fuoco o si rassettava la cucina, fra 2, 3 o 4 zie, nonne, cugine. C'erano le storie dell'orizzonte bisbigliato ai saraceni, di colei che salpava di continuo, la lunga camminata fino al mare e poi scappata da una contrada all'altra o saltata dalla finestra. Più che avventuriose e avventuriere, mi apparivano storie di fuggitive, ma non osavo dirlo, che chiaramente fuggivano. E più interrogavo le zie, più intravedevo possibilità, le loro, le mie. Le partenze possono essere questioni di vita sperata come alternativa alla morte rimanendo in vita. Fuggire dal sopruso maschile, cementato in una società patriarcale, fuggire dall'indicibile, era stato fatto. Secondo i parametri del sistema di valori di quel tipo di società, tali fughe a ricominciare, ricrearsi, continuare a vivere, comunque precariamente, non significano successo. Tuttavia, mi appariva sempre più chiaro che fare a modo nostro, a modo tuo che lo decidi tu, era una possibilità, era un valore che non avevi bisogno di negoziare una volta che decidevi di arrogartelo.
You're a tough act to follow. I'll be reading in English because Italian was lost to us long ago, sadly. I'm reading from my piece, Growing Up Italian in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Spare a thought for the poor pine barrens, which are right now on fire, which they tend to go on fire. And once again, it's arson. We never referred to ourselves as Italian Americans, but simply as Italians, which was how we were seen by the Anglo-Saxon Protestants of our southern New Jersey town. I was 11 years old the summer I began packing blueberries on my grandparents' farm, a checkerboard of good and poor soil and veined by irrigation ditches. The farm was located between Philadelphia and Atlantic City
in a town atop a 17 trillion gallon aquifer, the most important watershed in southern New Jersey. Was it a coincidence that it happened to mirror the Avellino of my great-grandfather, with its claim to having the most important watershed in the south of Italy? Did I come from a long line of water diviners? With farmers on my mother's side and business people on my father's, I lived in two worlds. I grew up at the harbor, a beautiful 16-acre property with a generous lake frontage, swimming pool, 2 docks, and a pitch and putt course, courtesy of Uncle, the rich businessman my father's sister married. There was never any real money in our family until Madeline Raytano married Louis Colasurdo. Uncle increased his fortune by financing everything the boys returning home from World War II needed: cars, appliances, personal loans. When Uncle bought the best property in town, a Tudor mansion built in the late 19th century by real English people, the house became our calling card. No matter how comfortable the homes of other well-off Italians, the harbor was a further rung up the ladder, a gift in the battle to assimilate, proving that we were better, and by that we meant less Italian. Within this larger grandeur was our more modest house, the long, low ranch my parents built on a smallish plot offered to them by Uncle. During blueberry season, Mom or Dad would drive me out of the tall wrought iron gates and toward the farm 3 miles away. Leaving the town's perimeter as we crossed into endless fields of blueberries, barns, Quonset huts, and dusty farm roads, I felt the switch into this other life. I loved the physical hard work of the farm and being so far from the social pecking order of town. But after a long day of standing on the hard cement floor of the packing house, I was full of restless energy and longed for that first sight of the harbor and the short, enchanted drive down our private lane to the aquamarine of the swimming pool. There I stripped off my dirty clothes in the ladies' cabana and, stepping into the hot shower, felt the switch back into this charmed world. This is just a series of vignettes that I'm reading. One cold February morning, I was home from college and making myself breakfast when Mom streamed into the kitchen. "Margaret Mead is out on the paddle boat with Mrs. Seeley." Our neighbors, the Seeleys, were friends of the famous anthropologist, and she sometimes visited. Mead had been brought to our town of Hamilton, New Jersey as a child in 1905 because her mother, Emily Fogg Mead, was conducting a study of the Italian immigrant. Thank God we were already with our feet up in our nice houses when we read what had been written about us. Published in 1907, Italian on the Land would only come to our attention in 1992 when a friend of Mom's, then president of the Hamilton Historical Society, published the Mead Report for all to see. Quote, "Only within the last years has anyone had a good word to say about them." Quote, "The surroundings of the Italian house as a rule are unattractive, the rear being cluttered with little sheds built out of odds and ends, with lumber and piles of rubbish of all kinds." Quote, "A number of Italians have neat, pretty places." Quote, "There is a class of newcomers who are unspeakably filthy. These people have no knowledge of the physical care of children and allow their houses to be overrun with dogs and chickens." Back and forth, we are alternately praised and disparaged. But eventually, the Mead Report, commissioned by the Bureau of Labor, would help inform the National Origins Act of 1924, whose disreputable goal was to limit immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. It was signed into law by President Calvin Coolidge. We had driven to Atlantic City, and while Mom read, my sisters and I dawdled by the water's edge. Dad wore his surf casting waders, thigh high in the choppy water that turned a dull gray as the sun set behind us. But he continued to pitch the line out, his sturdy arms wielding the pole like a saber. Finally, he turned and smiled. "Ready, girls?" We nodded. I had poked every dead starfish in Portuguese man of war and was ready to go home. We made the quiet drive back up the White Horse Pike, and at the brick-pillared gates, I felt the switch, the point when I turned back, leaving behind the image of the surf. As we pulled into our driveway, I gazed down toward aunt and uncles and searched for lights. We filed into our kitchen where food smells lingered way past dinner, but I was thinking about life down at the big house and how my sisters and I were served on silver trays by Carl in his white butler's jacket. Thank God the salt air had rendered me silent, or I might have expressed my obsession with that other life, only to be forced to listen to my parents disparage the rich ones, making sure to work in some image of loneliness, some insufficiency. I'll just read one more. It was a warm night with fireflies lighting like stars. Dad came outside and asked me if I wanted to gig some frogs. I said I did, though I didn't know what gigging was. Ransom's pond was a huge oval, still as glass, and a worn path ran along the water line. Without a word, Dad handed me the gig, a three-pronged spear attached to a broom handle, and whispered that I was to hold it just so. Next, he dragged the flashlight's beam along the pond's white bottom, where we caught sight of a frog. I crept forward on the balls of my seat and aimed for the dead center of its back. Now, he ordered. I plunged the stick down, but my second's hesitation was enough to allow the frog to spring away in a blur of water. You missed it, he said. We trudged around the pond a second time, but I knew Dad would take over and I wouldn't get another chance. He managed to get 4 more big ones. Then we went home. According to Dad, the frogs had to be skinned alive. But after watching him skin the first 2, I had to go into the house. I quaked at that hasty slice across the frog's middle, then clear around its back like having a peach, and how Dad's strong hands with the sprouting black hairs pulled the skin down in one great coat. The frogs twitched the whole time until their lower halves hung denuded in gray. Look at that, he exclaimed, tossing the legs into a swirling pan of butter and garlic. Minutes later, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, scoffing them down. Just a heads up, we're going to stay in Jersey. Maybe that's a warning. I'm Kathy Curto, and this is a shortened version of my essay in the anthology. The essay is called "The Perpetual Question Through the Lens of Il Geranio." Who do you think you are? And for tonight, I call it Wild. There was a house in my Jersey Shore neighborhood in the 70s and 80s that mesmerized me. Its allure had nothing to do with the bumper stickered cars parked in the driveway, the smell of hot dogs and hamburgers swirling from the grill, or even what I imagined their backyard to look like. A sandbox, a swing set, a pool slide the color of blue cotton candy. I didn't care deeply about these things, though I did dream about them as I rode my bicycle along the sidewalk in front of this curious spot. It was the wildflowers in the front yard I cared about. They were purple, yellow, orange, and pink. They were delicate, lily. Their answer to summer breezes was a graceful bow, a whispering bend. The red geraniums I helped my father plant in our backyard were thick and stocky. When the summer wind blew, they moved too, but not with grace. They were just trying to survive. If it was a hard wind, they banged into one another. Petals fell, staining and smearing the concrete below. I've written about these red geraniums before, mostly out of anger. I was angry at my parents for making me paint the clay pots for those poofy red flowers, and for making me carry water in old empty Paisano bottles to those pots when the rains didn't come, and for making me pinch dead petals off when they looked old and dry. I was angry at my parents for driving non-bumper stickered Cadillacs and Lincoln Continentals, and for serving sausage sandwiches with long green Italian frying peppers at our backyard barbecues. I was angry with my parents because of how those flowers affected the life I wanted at the time. I may have strutted around my neighborhood in a black t-shirt with glittery plastic iron-on letters that read Italian Princess across the front, but truthfully, I was confused. I loved my shirt,
but also craved hippie cars, white wooden fences, and American barbecues. During a visit to Calabria last year, fiery and fragmented memories of our Italian-American home resurfaced. This was the region where both of my grandfathers were born and raised. My bones rattled. I felt it. All at once, a tomato and red onion salad, various uses for starchy pasta water, the sacredness of black licorice, and the smell of fennel became new, alive characters in a story. I thought, that's okay. Oh, it's not.
It's good that it's yours.
Yeah, This is a brand new phone.
Yeah, but I think it's good.
That's all right. No, it's not my Jesus.
I apologize.
It's
I
fine.
know what's going on.
It's fine.
People are gonna set theirs off.
We're good. All at once, the tomato and red onion salad, various uses for starchy pasta water, the sacredness of black licorice, and the smell of fennel became new alive characters in a story I thought for sure I had completed. And there were red geraniums everywhere, popping up from earth and planters, from window boxes next to clotheslines, and from vases gracing tombstones. Deep red, blood red. I stood on the Calabrian soil and saw, among many other things, the geranium, Il Geranium, and a new part of my story was born. Who do you think you are? My father asked me over and over and over. For many years, there was fury in his voice. The tone was, how dare you want more, different? How dare you want to explore? His inquiry is softer these days, gone over 2 decades now. It's more like a whisper and comes from a place I still don't understand, yet I won't turn away. Who do I think I am? I might say back to him now, answering a question with a question, and then add, I am mostly red geraniums. And today, the geraniums I see are bolder and bigger in size, color, and spirit than I ever knew they could be. I see their beauty now, how they sway with power and stamina, how the petals come back with ferocity soon after the dried ones disappear. When I was young and confused, I missed seeing their grace, their beauty, their blood red strength. But life, loss, a visit to Italy, and faith changed that. In fact, those bursts of Calabrian red blooms may be the wildest of all.
All I can say is I thought I had a good book and I have a sick grandson.
That's okay, that's okay. No problem.
We're leaving Jersey.
Yes.
We're going to the Bronx.
Gets better.
Remember who you come from. You are a Faraka. You don't get apples from a pear tree. It's in the genes. I had your talents, Jean. God gave you those talents. Not for you. They are for the world. My father was a manufacturer of cinder and cement blocks. There was nothing about him that wasn't heavy. It wasn't just the weight of the world that pulled him down. It was the grit in his trouser legs, his trouser cuffs. My mother would turn his trousers inside out, shake them out, just to hear the pebbles come racing down, rattling down. Then she'd shake her head and say, it's a dirty business. My father had a lighter side. He was an incurable romantic, a Victorian who loved poetry and courted my mother with his love poems. When he couldn't sleep, for love sickness. He would get up in the middle of the night, get in his father's, what was the name of that? Really old car, beautiful car. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember. Chalk his love poems on the sidewalk in front of her house, knowing she couldn't help but see them and read them on her way to Evander Child High School in the Bronx, where she taught French, elocution, and gym.
Wow.
The year I turned 10, my father moved us out of the Bronx into Scarsdale,
All right.
a very snooty enclave where we quickly became despised and shunned as the first Italian family to crash the Crane Berkeley. It wasn't long before my father began delivering his poetry recitals as a strategy of resistance.
Oh, boy.
And I have to say, I got that phrase. I understood that from reading the postscript in the book. I never understood that that's exactly what he was doing. It was a strategy of resistance. Once a year, usually on a Sunday, he would stride into the kitchen, freshly showered and shaved, smelling of Old Spice, a little leather-bound copy of the Golden Treasury of English Poetry
Oh, right.
tucked under his arm. Now, mind you, his mother was an illiterate who never learned a word of English, but he had discovered the beauty of poetry from Manhattan College. We were an audience of two. My mother sat way in the back of the kitchen, and I sat right at his knee. I was entranced. He always began in the same way, and this was a real ritual, with the Highwayman, his favorite poem. The Highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. My mother, the elocution teacher, always interrupted. Up to the old inn door! Teacher, why don't you ever shut up? He hissed, and on it went. Tennyson, Gray's Elegy in the Country Churchyard, Wordsworth's Ode to Saint Louverture. He always murdered the French. But he couldn't help trying again and again because he loved the poem so much. And of course, my mother, given an opening, drove right through. Saint Louverture. He switched to rhetoric for a grand finale, quoting Daniel Webster while he waved one oracular finger in the air. Liberty and union, now and forever, one and inseparable. Pause. Put down the book. And now, delivering the real message. Now that's beautiful language. And we can understand beautiful language because we are people of the heart, not like these Yankee Doodles. I've spent my whole life unpacking these messages. And I took after my father. I too loved poetry and showed early promise as a writer. Beginning in 5th grade, I wrote a story about Yippee, our English fox terrier, who nearly drowned chasing a duck out to sea on Cape Cod. In 8th grade, I won the Mooney Essay Award from the Archdiocese of New York. My father drove me down the West Side Drive to the Chancery, where Cardinal Spellman hung a heavy medal around my neck. We took our pictures standing side by side, Daddy and me. And it showed up in the paper the very next day. And so it went all through school. I kept racking up prizes and awards. My father always by my side at every ceremony, bragging, buying champagne, bursting with pride. Oh, I was great at school. It was life I was about to fail. My father believed in me, and that was heavy stuff for a girl. One morning, he strode into the kitchen to announce, "Of all my children, you will be the one to carry the family name to fame." Specialness has its price. That heavy metal around my neck was about to turn into a lodestone. Then came another message. This one cast over his shoulder almost as an afterthought as he was heading out the back door on his way to work. "Don't worry, Jeannie. Look so ridiculous." "No psychology!" My mother yelled at his back, shaking her fist. Those 6 little words, an offhand remark meant to console, altered the course of my life. I was cut to the quick. I knew I was an ugly girl, skinny and dwarfed, myopic and flat-chested, with bad acne and a big nose. Now I knew nobody but my father would ever love me. I felt erased. And very soon after that, the parade of misfits, ne'er-do-wells, and freaks I was fated to attract began to show up. To be here reading an I Am books, the only one of its kind in the whole country, and to be with you. Thank you so much.
I'm Marianne Leone. I don't say it as well as Michela. Now we're in Plymouth, Mass, America's hometown. This is not from the book. This is from a rageful essay I just wrote and submitted to the Globe. They've printed my other op-eds, enough to land me in a gulag when I go out of the country. They didn't take this one.
Oh, there, can you just say one sentence about the essay, what is in the book, and that you just thought you couldn't capture its
The one that's
complexity?
in the book is about a book tour that I did in Italy for my first book. Nutrimenti published it, and they took me on a book tour, and I was going to read my book in Italian because they published it in Italian. And in the story, I talk about how difficult it was, even though I had written about my late son, which was my first book. I had never been brought to tears in English. I could not say the same words in Italian without weeping. And the essay explores that. What was that? Why was that? And my relationship with the Italian language. So that's what that's about. Onto the Rage Fest. Behind me, on a huge screen, scratchy, ancient black and white film shows people who could be related to me stumbling down a gangplank, looking both awed and terrified, carrying overstuffed bags and wailing children. Also behind me is the entire Plymouth Philharmonic Orchestra, about to launch into the opening bars of Peter Boyer's Ellis Island Symphony, The Dream of America. I'm standing before a podium, facing a full house, waiting for my cue to begin the spoken parts of the symphony. I place my reading on the podium, give a slight nod to my cousin who sits right in front of me, in the first row of seats about 8 feet away. She and her girlfriend smile at me. I look back at the podium and open the binder to my first speech. That's when I realized I left my glasses in the green room. The page before me now swims, unreadable as a tome in Sanskrit. The music swells behind me, and my cue is seconds away. During intermission, the maestro had come backstage and given the male reader and me our instructions. We were to enter with the maestro, go to our respective sides of the stage, and take a bow. The maestro would cue the orchestra directly behind us and then cue me. Earlier at a pre-performance cocktail party, my cousin told me she had changed her seat from one in the balcony to the first row on the floor of the house. We had laughed when I warned her not to distract me if she sat in front of me, but we knew the odds of that made that unlikely. Her seat turns out to be directly opposite the podium where I am to read. Now my cousin, 8 feet away, registers the alarm on my face as I stealthily search the pockets of my jacket and come up empty. I whisper an easily recognized obscenity. I look up and see my cousin and I indicate softly, I hope. No glasses. She nudges her girlfriend, who pulls out a pair of readers. Her girlfriend hunches over as if to make herself invisible and scuttles toward the podium. She hands me the glasses. The readers are the exact same strength as the ones I left backstage. The whoosh of terror begins to subside. My ancestors, my Italian antenati behind me no longer look overwhelmed. In fact, they seem to be smiling as I begin to speak the words of Helen Landsman-Cohen, immigrant from Poland, age 20. I was dreaming to come to America. My Italian immigrant mother was not dreaming to come to America. She was 16 years old and living on a garlic farm in Solmona, Abruzzo, when her father arranged a marriage to an old man who would bring adjoining land as a dowry. War had already come to Italy, and my mother had marched in patriotic parades wearing her Balila uniform and holding a baby doll, the fascist indicator of her only worth as a female. Women were no longer allowed to go to university under fascist rule, not that it was an option for my mother. My grandmother arranged for my mother to travel to America and be with her sister, also mired in an unhappy arranged marriage, but emerging as an astute businesswoman, investing in a bus and selling dresses to factory workers. How did my grandmother deliver my mother to her sister in America when she had no money of her own and was going against her sometimes abusive husband's wishes? She was lucky. My mother had an American passport. She was born in Boston to her immigrant non-citizen Italian parents, who eventually decided to return to their homeland. In the 30s, it was my mother's American passport that enabled my grandmother to find a man who wanted to emigrate to America and who would marry my mother, a veritable stranger, and with whom my mother would spend the time of their crossing to America in a cramped third-class stateroom. I guess my mother would be called an anchor baby in today's rude parlance, and if she were still alive, would be thinking about being sent back to Solmona at the behest of the current commander-in-chief. Like my late mother, I too am thinking about being sent back to Solmona, or more likely a gulag in Central America after some official finds my incriminating op-eds in the Boston Globe, or maybe my articles in the NPR's Cognoscenti about what my immigrant mother would think of the person holding court to dictators in the Oval Office. Hint, not much. Or my website post inviting the president to check out my tattoo. The memorial one for my late son. Jesse had severe spastic quadriplegia and would not have been allowed into America in the wave of immigrants that swept my maternal grandparents here in search of work. If he were alive today, my son might be sent away as one of the unproductive persons the president spoke of to his co-president, Elon Musk, when describing his fever dream of ridding America of its bad and unproductive citizens. Just as he doesn't like to be seen in the company of people with disabilities, asking that soldiers with disabilities be removed from public events in his company, and just as he told his nephew Fred his directive for his disabled son, maybe you should just let him die.
Lord have mercy.
The concentration camps to be built by his friend, the dictator Bukele, would be a handy solution, a final one, to be sure. I was dreaming to come to America. Unless there's another miracle like the sudden appearance of the rescue reading glasses, one that awakens my country from a fever dream of hate, I don't think I could say those words today without tears clogging my voice, silencing it forever. along with the dreams of my ancestors.
I guess I just would like anyone who wants to relate a version of their stories that connect to our stories to speak up. Or if you want to talk about the gender stuff, the immigrant stuff, or any aspect, or if you want to talk about red geranium. If there's any comment you would like to make, you do not have to ask a question. We would invite you into the conversation. Adriano, who grew up in Italy and lives here in the North End. Did any of this resonate with you, or do you recognize any of it? Because your mother is not Italian, your father
Yeah,
is.
yes, I think that's the main difference, where my mom is American, my father is Italian. But I will say that when I first moved to the States when I was 17 and lived in Lexington, Massachusetts, and did my last year of high school at Lexington High School, it was an extremely challenging experience just to go from Rome, Italy to Lexington, Massachusetts. And just, you know,
How did you deal with it? How did you survive that?
I don't know. But here I am, in the North End in Boston. Somehow I made it.
Does this neighborhood help you integrate it at all?
Yeah, I think so.
You are lucky to have both cultures, but that must have been one painful transition.
Especially at that age.
Right at that age, impossible. What was Anne thinking? Un'altra cosa. Writers, audience. No? No questions?
Okay, so I
Questa è
have,
mia sorella Lucia.
yes, hi
Sorella
everybody.
Lucia.
So just listening, I'm sorry, your name is Kathy. So our father also was an iron worker, but whatever happened in high school, that love of literature was deeply embedded
Oh,
in
maybe
him. It's
are you talking
extraordinary.
about Jean,
Weren't you talking about,
the
Yeah.
treasury of poetry?
Yeah.
yes, you didn't,
I was talking about the
Yeah,
oh, okay,
Yes.
Jean, yes. So, yeah, I mean, the ancient mariner, I mean, or he would say, okay, stop doing the dishes, get in here, girls. And he would read Wuthering Heights like annually. Now listen to this, and he would, you know, just give us the language of that he found of Joseph, the caretaker, whatever he was in the house, right? That was all from whatever happened in high school English.
Yeah.
You know, just made this deep connection that was turned out to be lifelong.
And helped us
I mean, the
enormously.
connection you're talking about, the writing, Joe.
Very parallel. It was
Yeah.
extremely parallel. Wuthering Heights is like a myth in our family.
Yeah,
Kathy at the window. hunting Heath.
yeah,
Well, what do you think that is? What is the connection with
yeah, that's a really good
With-
question.
beautiful language?
Yeah, beautiful language, and getting it,
I mean,
and not
it's-
pulling out, yeah,
Maybe it's just this innate cultural infused love for art in general.
mm,
That and you can't but help be surrounded by it, no matter where you go in
Yeah.
Italy, even if
Yeah.
it's a poor little town.
The
yes,
other thing
it's-
in our family was that my grandfather Kleps, my father's father, was a pretty difficult guy. But his one passionate connection to my father was they sang together all the
right, lots
time.
of singing, always.
And my father was one of the best storytellers I have ever met. And it was only when I was much older I realized that he used to do this. We're all at the table, drinking, eating. All of a sudden, my father, you just see him pulls back, withdraws. I later understood he was composing. And he would say, okay, everybody, listen to this. So Do you guys have that
total.
storytelling song?
Totally. I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that I became a writer and an actor because of sitting around a table and hearing stories and hearing them delivered in really incredibly dramatic
Exactly.
ways
Yeah.
also.
Delivered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
delivered, right.
Yes, that-
Yeah.
They were, I mean, there was actually a bard in our hometown in Avigliano, in southern Italy, which I lived until recently. And when we first, Lucia and I went, they said, oh, the children have the poet.
Wait, yeah,
The
and
poet.
they could
the
recite, of course, endlessly.
And
Yeah.
he would improvise poetry on current events in the town. I think it is very
Yeah,
broad
it's
away.
ver- And it's gonna be missing in the next generation because there aren't that many, I mean, we had the,
Yes.
big Sunday dinner every Sunday. And it was a many course dinner and it was, and that's when the storytelling happened. And
Right.
it's really not a thing now. So,
And there were rival versions of
Right.
the same story. They
Right.
would kill each other for which one was the real,
right, right.
the authentic.
You got it all wrong. This is what happened. Anybody else? Anna, what was your response to this? You're of another generation.
Yeah, I feel like I grew up less intimately connected to my father's Italianness, and so I'm having a bit of a different experience of returning to and trying to connect to the culture as a young adult. So it's always really rich and beautiful for me to hear stories of growing up integrated in between Italy and America. I was really touched by the final essay there. I think it feels meaningful to me to think about connecting my relationship to the country currently and to activism I'm involved in now to like a long lineage of Italian ancestors, especially Italian women.
Fierce.
That
My mother
feels
felt
really-
vergogna though. She felt shame because she was not married and I was a kid saying like, where's your wedding picture? Right? So there was no, there was no wedding picture because she had married that guy in the church. And my father was a civil ceremony. And she felt shame over that, even though she was a mangiapreti. You know what that means? It's a great idiom. It means priest eater. My mother was not religious, but yet she still felt shame over that. And when she finally told me when she was in her 80s, that what really happened. And I asked her, I said, weren't you afraid? You were 16 years old. You're alone with this guy. He's married to you. He could have raped you. She said, no, he was a gentleman. Like that. So, but still, I mean, that's amazing to me. 16,
I'm surprised that there's so much shame in the Italian community.
Well, the American community shamed you though.
And the American community, yeah, but that was a real feature of growing up. We were embarrassed over everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything.
Well, you didn't
You've
crown the
been
virgin if you had a
gesture?
vowel at the end of your
Then
name,
come
right?
up with this
Didn't
gesture.
matter.
Shame, shame, shame.
Yeah.
See, I think it comes right out of the Greek culture. The Greek culture is an honor shame culture. It's not an ambition. What's the opposite of it? I can't pull it right now. But the American culture is about getting ahead. No, our culture was honor shame. So we were primed,
Right.
and we were subas. Said to my grandmother, oh, what was Salt like? He said, of all the towns, made subas very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I just thought about the grief. I was going to say, when you asked that question about the connection to language and poetry and the oral tradition, it brought me back to what you had said in the beginning about the connection to the Greek culture and that the storytelling and the oral tradition, which was such a huge part of that. And so maybe there is a connection
I think
there.
we're much more Middle Eastern culture than we are a Western culture. And a lot of our traditions really, and storytelling is certainly in hospitality, it's Greek, but I think we're way sticking out there
Yeah.
towards the Eastern Mediterranean.
But imagine that southern Italy was part of the Greek Empire. Yeah, the Magna Graecia.
Yeah, I was gonna say the north probably feels differently.
That's why they came down and raped the South.
That's
They
right.
literally did it for the Risorgimento.
That's right.
You know, literally
Yeah.
killed and raped the Southerners because we had all the wealth at that time.
Interesting.
That's, I'll give you the quote on that book.
I also just wanted to mention, you know, a connection to international history, that today is May Day, and we should acknowledge
Yes.
that this is an international day of celebration of the history of working people that originated in this country.
Good point. Yeah, it's strange moment in our history.
Oh, totally strange, but we have to pull out the strands of hope and connection wherever we can.
Stick together.
Does anybody other from another culture have any parental or grandparental stories about oral culture or storytelling or sitting around the table or anything? Does it connect to any of you? What we're saying, or did anything relate? No, love banging. Okay, we would love it if you would buy it. But we won't insist. Thank you so much for coming.
The car is a Pierce arrow.
Who would have guessed? I don't know. I don't really know. I mean, I guess, yeah. 20s, you know, maybe 30. Yeah. Very ill. Yes, I'm sure they are.
Yes, but I.
Yes, okay, so we'll do those. That's good.
That would be the thing. Yeah, I don't get that.
Okay, got it. Yes, yes. 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 My grandmother, that was not really small. Very quickly.
They're all politics.
The bell of the wall.
The older Italian conservatives are now we have returned the church to the not judging. I know.
Oh, really? From where?
Did you?
So here we go, is that the drill? The chair is over?
No, I've never seen a chair that folds like this. I'm trying to figure it out.
Oh, okay.
I saw it fashionable over there.
All right.